So thank you all for coming. I'm not leaving. So my bit is about national debt. Let's try to make it fun, although talking about national debt is not necessarily an intuitively fun topic. But at least, so you hear a lot about national debt, and there are a lot of misconceptions, there are a lot of half facts and half truths, and all kind of fears are going around. So let's just try to get a handle on it, talk about what it is, how we got there, and why is it problematic. Well, we have a lot of debt. Latest numbers are showing about $16.7 trillion. $1 trillion is a lot of money. That's millions, which is a trillion. So we owe this money, and as a collective, as a nation, and some questions come up with this. Well, how much of a problem is it? So we owe this money, so how are we going to pay it off? Who is going to have to pay it off? Is it ourselves, our kids, their kids? To whom do we owe the money? So that's China. Can they call in some favors because they sort of hold a lot of bonds and notes from us? What should we expect in terms of inflation? And what are the possible fixes to this situation? Well, first of all, it should be noted that debt is not a new phenomenon. We actually had it for a very long time. This is a recent history. So this is talking about from 1992 to 2012. But if you pull back this chart even further, you'll see that it has been increasing from there. From 1980s, it has been steadily going up. But this chart looks very sort of worrisome. You go, wow, this debt issue is skyrocketing. So it's just humongous. How are we ever going to pay it? And you can say whether it's humongous or not. It's hard to put 60 trillion in perspective. But to give you an idea, our economy, everything we produce in a given year, services and goods amounts to about 14 trillion. So it's all of us working more than a year for free. Us, our parents, our neighbors, is what it would take to pay it off if we had to pay it off in a year without consumption. So it seems very high, and it seems really worrisome. And it's more than our GDP. And the question is then, why don't we hear the markets going crazy over it? Why doesn't the United States have investors screaming that we're not going to buy your bonds and T-notes and give us more interest to take on this enormous risk? Well, here's why. If you see the publicly owned debt and you see where the United States is, we're actually number 35. So there are other countries that have a lot more debt, and some of them are in the news and some others are not. So you hear, for example, you see Japan is the leader, and followed by Greece. You probably have heard something about Greece, that they have a lot of debt, they have borrowed quite a bit, and to the point that they cannot pay. They are trying to renegotiate it, and in fact, investors have taken a haircut already on most of the Greek debt. But interestingly enough, you don't hear anything about Japan. It's not as though Japan doesn't have a problem, but why is it some countries so prominently feature in the news as problematic and investors worry, and some countries, investors have much easier time buying their securities? Well, it's not just the debt itself. The debt itself matters in several aspects. First of all, how much interest do you pay on your debt? How much does it cost you to borrow more? How much do you pay on what you have already borrowed? To whom do you owe this? If most of your debt is held domestically by your own citizen, it's seen as a healthy sign because you actually have your own internal buying power. And what is your repayment history? Have you behaved previously? Have you paid off? Have you been meeting your debt obligations previously? So that's one side of the equation. On the other hand, when you borrow money, you repay in the future. So what matters is the current job, whether you have a job, let's say you borrow money from somebody else, your current income matters. This is our GDP. How stable is the economy? How productive is the economy? How much economy depends on factors we cannot control, such as international trade, oil dependence, how healthy is the labor force? What does unemployment look like? And lastly, what is that going to look like in the future? What are the projections for economies to grow? And what is the, how much of the world economy, your particular economy, what fraction do you represent? So bigger economies tend to be more important, and investors are more forgiving towards the bigger economy developers. How productive it is, how does productivity look going forward? Is unemployment going to remain high, or is it not? So, and these are the factors that explain why countries like Japan, Belgium, UK, US are frankly just better than Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. Peace. Some of the investments. So it's not the fact that we have $16 trillion. Is this notion, what is our economy looking like going forward? What is the income potential? What is the GDP potential? What does the growth look like? Those are the crucial factors that tell investors what is the likelihood of the United States meeting these debt obligations. This is not to say that we shouldn't worry at all. $16 trillion is still a lot of money. So this is directly from US Treasury. And if you look at this, you can see that the very big contributors to our debt, our expenses in terms of Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, all of those things are projected to keep on climbing well into 2040s. There's, on the other side, you have this projected reduction because of this affordable health care. This remains to be seen. But there is no question that Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security costs are going to keep on piling on. So, and our government, frankly, does not have a viable solution right now. So we know these costs are going to increase. We know that we need to either modify something on this side of discretionary and non-discretionary, especially spending, or we have to address the revenue issue. So just because we have $16 trillion debt, this debt will grow. There is no question about it. It will keep on growing, which means that Washington will have to sit down again and increase the ceiling while negotiating how to solve it in the future. And that's what seems to worry many investors, is this uncertainty. And when I see the uncertainty, it's not the uncertainty. We're certain that the debt is going to grow. There is no uncertainty there. It has been growing for 40 years. There is no uncertainty. The uncertainty is there seems to be an ability to come to any kind of agreement on how to deal with it, or even to agree to pay on the bills you already accumulated, which is the debt ceiling. So some questions remain now that we know that the debt is here. There's quite a bit of it. It's going to stay. The investors who are buying US debt do not seem to be as worried about it. The United States has really good reputation, the best really. So what are the remaining questions? Now that we have this pile of money wheel, now that we know that what the future holds more or less. So what are some of these questions about who's going to pay, how we're going to pay, to whom do we owe? Well, first question is the burden of debt on future generations. This argument is seen a lot and heard a lot in the political circles. I don't want my kids to pay. Well, first of all, the evidence on whether we care about our kids is very scarce when you look at economics. It's just inconclusive. People fail to leave bequests, and you don't necessarily, on average, show to be as concerned about your kid's future as some of these claims suggest. Another second issue that's very important is the fact that we owe most of this debt to ourselves. So the people who hold U.S. securities, from whom U.S. government bond, are Americans. They're mostly our citizens. So, but there is an issue of redistribution. Not everyone. How many of you here own T-bonds, T-notes, T-bills? Yeah, so there are Americans that are just not in this room. So there are these people among us, and there are not some foreign entities, although foreign entities do own quite a bit. So we are actually, part of it is going to be paid to our kids, at least some of our kids. So nearly 10 trillion of the debt is held by public. which is not government entities, and includes all kind of funds and things. What worries economists is this idea that if we're going to keep on piling the debt, the national saving is going to decrease. National saving is really important because it ensures growth. It ensures our income in the future. It ensures capital accumulation, a healthy economy, and if we have a lot of growth, it will make it very easier going forward to repay it. So if national debt hinders this saving and lowers the saving numbers, that's grounds to worry. Well, the next question is, you hear this in the news, Chinese own a lot of US debt. In fact, Chinese own somewhat of a significant chunk, $1.2 trillion is owned by Chinese. The next in line is Japanese, who almost hold the same amount, 1.1, although you don't hear anything in the news about that. But that's a recent phenomenon. If you were here in the 80s, you would hear about it. Japanese are coming and they own everything, and we're just totally in the hole because they're buying over there everything. So is that a bad thing that the world keeps on buying our government bonds, notes, bills? And why do Chinese, Japanese keep on buying it? There are several aspects. One is the trade imbalance. And the other, very importantly, they see it as a very good investment. The United States is seen as a very safe, doesn't offer a lot of reward and return on your investment, but as a very good place to safely put your money. As long as this continues, we shouldn't worry. We shouldn't worry about at least the part of the Chinese calling in favors. Frankly, it's very hard to borrow money from somebody and then someone comes to you and say, hey, I lent you some money. Now you have to do this and this for me. It just frankly doesn't work like that. But what they have as an ability is they have an ability to sell those securities whenever they wish. And more importantly, they have an ability of stop buying them, which could put pressure on the interest rates, which means that to borrow in the future, we would have to, if that happens across the board, and investors just lose faith somehow in the U.S. government, U.S. bonds, that will mean going the Greek route and having to deal with yields we cannot afford. And but we're nowhere near this, really. U.S. securities are still seen as very safe and probably the most trusted securities that are out there. So long as this remains true, we're okay. How long is it going to remain true? It's hard to say. But clearly, in the short run, nothing is going to change. In the long run, yeah, in the long run, things do look differently because of some of the pressures that start coming up with consistent borrowing. Some of the pressures have been already noted. There's inflation. So quantitative easing, and generally it has been a recovery that we're in, but it's a jobless recovery. So policymakers are worried, and fiscal policy remains scarce, to say the most about it. Really, there's not a whole lot in terms of fiscal policy. There's not a lot of disagreement on it. So the bankers, like Federal Reserve, have to step in and do things like quantitative easing to ensure that they meet their dual mandates of job and inflation. And recently, Japanese bankers, Federal Reserve, UK bankers have said all that they're more willing to be more dovish, meaning that they're not going to be as aggressive in fighting inflation, and they're going to be more tolerant towards it, and they're going to be more concerned about potential GDP and jobs. And as you have seen from Keith's speech, they seem to be exactly what investors are forecasting, that this quantitative easing is going to continue, the interest rates it's going to be the world of easy money for some time. But eventually, again, there is this chance of increased inflation. And this money at some point is going to trickle in. Now, of course, if you look at current inflation, nothing like this is happening. It's interesting if you ask people on the street, they did a number of these studies where they pull people aside and say, what do you think the inflation is? You hear all kind of insane numbers. It's 20s, 30s. The reality of the matter is inflation has been very low. And it's, again, going to remain very low in the short run. If the inflation increases, the Federal Reserve actually has the tools, has the brake pedal to slow things down. It's going to come at a cost, as every policy. But they do have the tools available to them. So inflation as a fear, we shouldn't worry about it now, but it may materialize in some future. The point of some future materializing likely points to the fact that we cannot continue doing this forever. We have $16 trillion debt. It's growing larger. Eventually, we need to do something about it. Eventually, the faith in U.S. government securities is gonna wane. Eventually, the inflation is gonna materialize. Here's another pick of the problem itself. This is yet again from the Treasury. The problem has been here in 1993 and it's here now. They just picked 1993 and 2010 because the economic gap between potential and real GDP is very similar. What our spending side is way larger than our revenue side. And the big contributors like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security have gotten much larger. So these are the issues that need to be addressed whenever we talk about sequestration, whenever we talk about ceiling deals, any kind of fiscal deals going forward, have to address this big ticket, have to address this disconnect. Well, why don't they do it now? Why don't they just sit down and do it? Like, again, Keith mentioned, people don't want to touch things like Medicare, Social Security, taxes, and defense spending. But without touching those categories, no fixes are going to materialize. But what economists disagree the most is not about how to do this. It's clear how to do this. It's painful and it needs to be done. What economists disagree the most about is when to do it. That is a big problem, but fixing this problem is going to cost. And you have to pick the right moment to do this. It's going to cost jobs, it's going to cost growth. If you look at the austerity that's happening in Europe, they shaved off their growth into negative territory. The growth forecasts for Europe are negative. They're de facto in a recession. If we do this now, if we do this using some severe hedging, we fear we have a large probability of doing the same to our economy. So I think the Hill, the President, the Congress, all of those folks need to get around to fixing it, but they also need to plan it very carefully and do it in the right way. I'm going to leave you with that thought and pass it on to Carol.